It's the Wilk Report. I'm Micah Wilk coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. With me again is Larry Bernard, recovering from a back injury. Welcome, Larry.
Yes, once you get to a certain age, your body decides, you know what, I don't like the way you slept, so your back is going to hurt.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I've got similar problems with my neck, herniated discs, and actually it's the C6 and C7, or maybe
Oh,
C7 and C8. It's right
oh,
where
that's
the
not good.
nerve clusters branch out into the shoulders and arms. So
Yeah,
when one or both of those gets pinched, I'm pretty much toast.
yeah.
But yeah, we've got some interesting news. We've got Ant-Man and Wasp plunging 75% for $8.4 million Friday. This is as of yesterday. So yeah, let's take a look at the bloody... Yeah, and, this is what kills me is like Marvel is known for doing good stuff, but here we've got... Yeah, it's kind of
So
a
I'm
mystery to me.
I'm gonna put an asterisk on my following comments. I have not seen the movie yet, but here's the problem I am hearing from the movie. It's too disposable. The original Ant-Man was kind of disposable, and it only had elements to connect it to the broader MCU because it had to. And this doesn't have anything that really makes it part of what's going on in the MCU right now, and it's not really telling a new or compelling story involving the character.
All right, so basically, this is like the Mystery Men of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, I
It's
mean,
kind of throwaway.
it's a throwaway, forgettable movie from what all the reviews I've been seeing has been, and based on the audience drop off, audiences seem to agree. There's not any word of mouth keeping this movie up and running.
Yeah, and that's a problem going in because if you think about it, Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of has spent 10 years building up its audience and telling stories that people actually like hearing. So to have one of its films perform this badly, especially right on the heels of Infinity War and Black Panther, I mean, that's
But it
not
could
good.
be that basically the crest for Infinity War was so high, people weren't ready to recharge themselves just yet for Ant-Man. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility. I mean, it does reach a point where it's like you've set the bar so high that anything that doesn't at least match, if not surpass that, is kind of going to suffer.
Or
And
they need to recover the energy to get invested into something they care more about, like the new Avengers movie, or Captain Marvel, or the new Spider-Man movie.
yeah, because I think those three will probably do better. Ant-Man never really struck me as being one of those characters that people really cared much about, even in the comic books. I mean, Hank Pym, he was a minor character relative. Well, I wouldn't say minor character, but in terms of comparing it to the rest of the Avengers.
He was ended up becoming more of a supporting element character of the Avengers through most of his time as a character.
Yeah, and in that regard, I don't think as a movie it was ever going to really be able to compete against its bigger brothers in the cinematic universe.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we've got some other stuff coming up uh, because DC. I call up the screen here.
The DC Cinematic Universe is still a giant dumpster fire.
Yeah, kind of jumping the shark because Polygon.com is reporting every DC movie coming up in the next couple of years.
Allegedly. I'm going to use the
Allegedly.
words allegedly in the strongest terms.
Yeah,
We know
because
Aquaman is happening because it's got a committed date this year. We know that. We've seen pictures, so Aquaman is happening.
yes, we've got Aquaman, we've got Shazam.
We look at that picture for a moment. The color scheme of Shazam and who I'm guessing is Billy Batson against the normal color scheme of a DC movie just stands out so much.
Yeah, and that's kind of DC Warner Brothers' fault and kind of Zack Snyder's fault for kind of setting everything so dark in the wake
Yeah,
of Chris Nolan's trilogy.
that just looks so jarring. But
But not
Zack
something I would really complain about because, after all that dark, gritty stuff that didn't really work, I'm kind of ready
yeah.
for something a little bit more bright and cheerful,
Also,
especially since we're not getting it from Superman anytime soon. But yeah,
yeah.
Shazam being
Also
released
Zachary
next year.
Levi, he's a charismatic, likable actor. I have positive hope for this movie, which is happening because they've shot scenes for it, so we know it's going to actually happen.
Yeah, and then we've also got Wonder Woman 1984.
Which is also going to happen because Gal Gadot has this is her it moment as an actress right now. She's hot right now, and so things are going to keep running.
But still not really worth paying $350 for an autograph. No, sorry, not happening.
The
Uh,
Joker origin movie, I do not believe that is happening. To quote our president, I believe that is fake news.
yeah, yeah, this is one of those things to be determined 2019, 2020. It's set to be directed by The Hangover's Todd Phillips and produced by Phillips and Martin Scorsese. So, yeah, this is an interesting development because it's not going to involve Jared Leto. It's got a high caliber director like Martin Scorsese coming in. Uh, and apparently, Jared Leto did not take the news well, according to
No,
Polygon.
allegedly they're going to make another movie involving the Joker that he's going to be in, though.
Right. But they've got Joaquin Phoenix taking up the Joker
But
role.
the big problem is it's going to be the Joker origin movie, which means they're going to do the boring parts from The Killing Joke, where he's a bad stand-up comedian who has a terrible day and then falls in a chemical pit.
Yeah, thanks to
That
Batman, partly, who actually tried to save him. But, interesting thing about The Killing Joke is that Alan Moore never really intended that to be canon. It just kind of got adopted as such by DC because it was such a popular one-off.
it was a good story.
Yeah, and actually, there's also a bit of a cheat there in the story itself where the Joker says, sometimes I remember it one way, sometimes another. So, for now, I'm going to remember it this way. So that's kind of Alan Moore's way of saying, don't take this too seriously. It's not
Yeah.
intended to be, something that's
And
set
it's all
in
designed to
stone.
set up the Joker's central thesis that any person can become like him with one bad day, which we see in Christopher Nolan's Batman. And Batman is the antithesis of that belief system that no, a good person in a bad situation will always act as a good person.
Yeah. And,
So I mean,
yeah,
what really is there in a movie to make that interesting?
exactly. Well, I don't know. If you do it right, and Scorsese is the type of person who is not going to be content to have, just good enough or something to fill seats. No, he's actually someone who's willing to take risks and tell a good story. Now,
I'm not going to believe that movie exists until we actually see footage of the movie being filmed.
yeah.
Until we see Joaquin Phoenix in Joker makeup, I believe that's a fake story, that's not actually going to be produced. I
Yeah.
don't believe it at all.
Yeah, but we've also got a planned Cyborg movie coming up for 2020.
I'm also going to call fake news on that one as well, because we have to have a black superhero movie because of Black Panther. That's the only reason they're making this movie, but I think Aquaman's going to flop and they're going to panic and they're going to pull the plug on that one.
Yeah, and they're also talking Green Lantern Corps with Jeff Johns' recent role switch at DC. He'll be writing the movie apparently, but a lot of this stuff, again, like Suicide Squad 2. I mean, the first movie didn't do very well, so I mean, because they were searching for director, including Mel Gibson, and he didn't want it apparently, but supposedly it's going to be directed by Gavin O'Connor, who directed The Accountant.
Well, you know the actually interesting rumor about the Green Lantern movie?
Yeah.
They're trying to get Tom Cruise to play Hal Jordan.
Oh God, no, no.
They really want to sell that in Korea and Japan and China. They really want to sell the heck out of it.
Yeah, well, if you're going to have a black superhero movie, there is Jon Stewart to play Green Lantern. You don't have to focus on Hal Jordan. You can have Hal, put in a supporting role or a cameo, but you can
Yeah.
focus on.
Well, I mean, actually, if you look down at the bottom there, it says, mentor role.
Yeah.
So that's going to be how that's going to play out.
Yeah, and then of
But
course.
Suicide Squad 2 is going to happen because Michelle Robbie is viewed as hot right now in multiple.
Not hot enough, apparently, because Suicide Squad kind of sucked, and nobody really saw it. And I don't see anyone doing Flashpoint either, because again,
The guy who did Flash was extremely underwhelming.
yeah, and then of course there's talks about Batgirl and Nightwing, and
Well, first of all, Batgirl's not going to happen because Joss Whedon, that was his little sweetener for doing Justice League and taking over that horrible situation with Zack Snyder,
Yeah, and stepped down earlier this year saying he doesn't have a story, and
which is a
also,
lie because there's a habit certain comic book creatives have called, which we from the anime community is called waifuism. Barbara Gordon is his waifu, one of the female comic book characters he has a deep and passionate love for. He's got a couple of dozen stories for her. But he said, "Oh, I don't have a story because his ex-wife exposed him for misusing his position of authority to get women in their marriage." And that Warner Brothers didn't want to touch him in the current climate with that, and I don't really blame them.
yeah, and yeah, so Christina Hodson has taken over as screenwriter. But thing about Wheaton though, and despite his personal issues, I mean, he is still a good writer, and this is a guy who brought us Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was very well written and lasted for 7 seasons.
Firefly, which could have been a long-running TV show if not for bad decisions by Fox.
Yeah, so I mean,
Dollhouse, which also could have been a really excellent TV show if not for bad decisions by Fox. The first Avengers movie was Joss Whedon at his best. It had him firing on all of his cylinders on all the things that make him a great writer and a great director, and only half of the things that he does that drags his craft down.
yeah, and also so they've got like some throwaways like Nightwing and Justice League Dark, and
I at least have to respect the guy who's looking at Nightwing because he's really interested in getting a guy who can physically do the Nightwing role. Somebody who you could realistically believe is a former circus performer who became a trained martial artist.
Yeah, well, if you look at the graphic here on Polygon for Swamp Thing, it looks too much like a video game character. If they're going to do that, they're going to have to be... And of course, obviously, 5 years later, they're not going to be doing a Man of Steel sequel.
Well, they're now saying, well, should we recast Henry Cavill because of his inappropriate comments about being afraid to date women? So
yeah, well,
I don't believe that.
Well, that and he can't act.
I think the problem was he's not been given an opportunity to act in either Superman sequel. He was very good in Man from U.N.C.L.E. Again, he did everything he could for that movie, but the movie was poorly thought out. But he did all he could.
Yeah, and it seems like
a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah, and a side note, because the Man of Steel sequel, they mentioned Christopher McQuarrie. Now, there's a story about that because I was watching a Midnight's Edge video by Andre, and he mentioned McQuarrie and James Mangold making Twitter comments about why no one will take on Star Wars. And so naturally, being the sort of person I am, I went ahead and sent a tweet to both Mangold and McQuarrie, stating, the problem with Star Wars is that it's already been taken over by hack directors.
Yeah.
And so Mangold, gave a typical man-baby response, and McQuarrie actually was willing to have a discussion with me. So we ended up having a starter conversation on Twitter through private messages, and I will share details on that in my next blog entry, but, with his permission, of course, because I don't want to, embarrass him.
You don't want to ruin having somebody who's an actual famous, qualified director having conversations with you by breaking a trust. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, so, with his permission, I'll write up an entry about that, or even see if I can get him on the show. But, that would be interesting, because I found a link that said, visionaryorhack.com, where it actually gives a definition of what is a hack director, and it seems to me like Jar Jar Abrams and Ruin Johnson pretty much fit that definition as well as anyone.
Actually, there's a guy who's a weird heavy metalhead who does review of old 1940s movies, who had a clip from Orson Welles talking about how most of the directors in his day were completely incompetent and didn't know how to improve the movie, and that they basically wrote on the backs of actors. So this isn't a new problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and, it seems to me that, like I said, the original problem is that Star Wars did hire hack directors to work on the new trilogy, and, also on the spin-off movies, although, whether Rogue One would fit the definition as being directed by a hack is kind of up in the air.
Well, it was hack directed because it was directed and hacked into pieces.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, there's another definition of hack, but But yeah, so we've got another thing to go, keeping on DC, because they are comparing the Shazam costume to Batman and Superman, which,
Is kind of unfair.
yeah, it is. Because honestly, I don't think that there's. Oh, here, let me see if I can. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, just kind of looking at the picture here, we've got this kind of Dark Knight Returns Frank Miller-esque bat costume, and then we've got Shazam's kind of bright and cheerful, which again fits the character.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a kind of bright and cheerful we didn't get with Superman that we should have. Which
Yeah.
again, you've got to have something that fits the look and feel and lives up to the spirit of the character. You don't have to get the letter of it right.
Yeah.
Because Superman the movie made a bunch of departures
I mean,
from the source
Josh,
materials, but Richard Donner and
Kevin Feige actually talked about how the template for how you adapt to superhero movies is still Superman 1979, which took all the broad elements of Superman from the 30s to then and mashed it together into something that was true to as much of it as they could.
Yeah, and speaking of Superman, DC is debuting the first television commercial for the Bendis-led Superman reboot, which, let me see if I can find... here it is.
So are you a comic book reader?
I actually used to be part owner in a comic book shop, so yeah, you can say
So you're
that.
familiar with the flaws of Brian Michael Bendis as a writer?
Not lately. I haven't really been reading in the
Bendis
last
has
few
become
years.
kind of a hack. He's, overusing a lot of certain things, but the editors at DC have at least gotten him back to form of 5 to 10 years ago, Bendis. Probably more like 5.
Yeah, well, let's see the commercial here. Yeah, so that's the commercial, but
That's not really accurate to what's happened in the run of the series. And there was a very large pushback as the series was coming on because Super Sons, the comic book that involved Damian Wayne and Jonathan Kent, a relatively new character who was the son of Superman and Lois, got hugely popular. Had excellent writers on it who did an excellent job writing teenagers and children as teenagers and children, not young adults or stupid adults.
yeah.
And he was planning to retcon them out of the story, Jonathan Kent, but he kind of, I think, got pushed back into having to bring them back into the story, but he sucks at writing kids.
Yeah, well, so he's going to have to go back to the drawing board on that. Because the thing about DC, and I have to give them credit for this, is that when they screw up and fans complain, they at least take steps to correct it. Hence, we get DC Rebirth
Yeah.
out of the ashes of New 52, which was tanking. But yeah, this whole concept of actually having Superman have a son with Lois Lane, well, that's been touched upon before on the big screen in Superman Returns, which, when that movie is considered better than Man of Steel and pretty much anything put up by DC currently, yeah. But then again, I kind of also got that they were trying to wrap up the whole Richard Donner continuity with that one, and it just didn't quite work. Partly because they made the suit out of rubber, which again, you don't. I don't know. They were trying to recreate the whole Batman look, and
Yeah.
the costume colors were darker, and it just didn't look good. So
Also, interesting thing that's happening, which we may see as a trend in comic books, G. Willow Wilson is now going to, in November or December, start writing Wonder Woman.
oh really?
Yeah, she's had a creative differences / not renewing my contract with Marvel, with Miss Marvel. which was her signature character. But she's also done that thing for so many years at this point in time that realistically she probably wants a break from the character too.
Yeah, yeah, and I can understand that because eventually you get burned out. You take it as far as you can go personally, and then it's time to move on. It happens in comic books.
Yeah.
Sometimes, quite frequently.
And
Others.
G. Willow Wilson, I had conflicting feelings early in the Miss Marvel run, but as the character got going, I liked it a lot better. So she could do some very interesting and creative things with Wonder Woman, or they could be bad. I just, there really needs to be somebody good to keep the editing direction consistent and kind of try to bring some of the energy that the movies are bringing to the character. The movies are the best thing that's happened to Wonder Woman since Linda Carter, let's face it.
Yeah, and, speaking of comic book characters being rebooted, let's go ahead and tease a hint because at the same time Superman is being rebooted, we've got
I actually
possibly
picked up that comic book. I picked up that comic book. It was amazing.
Yeah.
The story was kind of vague and soft, but I bought it knowing what the payoff ending was, and it was like, I am so happy right now.
Yeah, because it's taken 11 years to try and start fixing this mistake, and it looks like Marvel is finally on a track. Because I never really bought Joe Quesada's lame excuse for undoing the marriage, because you can have... I mean, being married to a superhero is like being married to a cop on steroids, because...
You know what his excuse was? He was getting a divorce, so Spider-Man couldn't stay married. Right,
but you could just write Spider-Man getting divorced, not completely undoing the marriage from its very beginning.
Divorce is morally wrong, as opposed to making a deal with Satan to end your marriage.
But it's more believable. That's also, the thing, though. It's like...
Also, I don't know, maybe Aunt May dying and staying dead for a while would have been good for Spider-Man.
Yeah, because death is part of life, and when you're telling stories, you want to keep it as grounded in reality as possible, and because there comes a point where it's like they're trying to keep Peter Parker a perpetual child clinging to his Aunt May to the point where it's like, Peter, I would like to die sometime and be reunited with my husband because I'm 106 years old now, and
also he now is he was in an unhealthy relationship with Mockingbird, who was basically, they were having a sexual relationship. She was also bad-mouthing him and demeaning him on a regular basis.
Yeah, and, so this is really, just undoing this. I mean, personally, I would have it because it seems like during One More Day they had Mary Jane whisper something into Mephisto's ear where it's like it's implied, this could be undone later on if we have to do it, but Quesada didn't want to, so but he's gone now, and now we've got an opportunity. So we've got Nick Spencer, he's the guy behind Hydra, Captain America.
Apparently Nick Spencer's decided he needs to build up some good comic book fan karma.
Yeah. But this is one of those messes that they really need to undo. Basically, find a loophole in the contract that lets Aunt May stay alive, or basically, maybe Spider-Man has to make a choice to let his aunt go finally, where like she's telling him, look, I'm supposed to be dead now. Let me go because you have to move on and deal with life without me.
Because you've got Mary Jane to. That's always how the contract with the devil stories end up. If you're making a contract with the devil to save somebody's life, that person dies anyway, in a way that's not covered by the devil's contract.
Yeah. Yeah, because the, what really gets me, and because the whole setup, it's like, it's kind of like with maximum clonage. It's like they could have done it the right way. They could have found something plausible, but then they had to keep like, oh, who's the clone and who's the real one? Oh, we're going to make the clone the real one and the real one the clone. Yeah. Oh, readers don't like they don't like that, so we'll switch it back, and Kane's a clone, and everyone's a clone.
Yeah.
So now we've got Gwen Stacy back. I don't know if she's a clone or some alternate reality.
They reached that at the end of Secret Wars 2. I think it was Secret Wars 2 or Crisis, whatever. They did a big reset of Marvel. So Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales Spider-Man got transport to the new main Marvel universe.
Yeah, which is,
So,
that whole Secret Wars 2 never should have happened either. It's just, guys, enough. And
yeah.
first of all, quit trying to copy DC. DC is the one that reboots itself every few years now, and look what keeps happening. So why would you do that?
Well, the thing is, this set of reboots has, Jim Lee, who has a good creative overarching vision that he's managing DC with, and Marvel doesn't have that. There's nobody keeping an eye on the ball as a chief creative officer.
Yeah, yeah, and, speaking of more Marvel stuff, we've got Sean Combs calling Black Panther a cruel experiment in Hollywood, which, not necessarily laughing at Sean Combs, because I think he does actually have a legitimate point here, because
He has a legitimate point, but he said it in the worst possible way.
yeah, it's like, well, no one ever accused him of being an eloquent speaker, but he says it's a small baby step to inclusion, rather than an outright game changer, which I think that is a good point. We've seen Get Out be successful. We've seen Black Panther be successful, but these do seem to be outliers in an industry that is very much still dominated by white people. Which is, again, that's normal because, whites, for now at least, are still technically the majority. And so, yeah, there's still going to be more white directors and writers in Hollywood. But, yeah, I do think that, yeah, we do need to, give more diversity a chance, because
Well, you know what Sean should do is he should get a whole bunch of his black millionaire friends together. They should go sit down with Warner Brothers and get the rights to start making milestone comic book movies.
yeah, like get Spike Lee, for crying out loud. I mean, he does pretty good work, and
Yeah.
these guys have the resources to do it. And now you've also got independent platforms like Kickstarter,
Yeah.
Indiegogo. You've got you've got all these other platforms for raising money to do your own project. You don't have to rely on Hollywood.
Or you don't have to rely on China, which can lead to very bad results.
Yeah, that's, oh my god, I still can't believe that. Yeah, I actually saw this thing online where it's like someone asked, what if The Rock has been playing the same character through all these movies? And, well, no, that's just The Rock being a personality actor, and that's, Tom Cruise, it plays Tom Cruise.
Stallone plays Stallone most of his movies. Arnold plays Arnold most of his movies.
Yeah, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because,
if you got that kind of charisma, work with it.
Yeah, and Stallone, I think, is the most successful because he's actually willing to make himself look bad in order to play a role. Like his role in Copland, for example, he actually packed on weight and he looked very uncomfortable in his own body. Well, because he's used to being in shape, and that kind of added to his performance. So,
First Blood was an amazing performance.
Yeah.
The original Rocky was an amazing performance.
Yeah. So, but getting back to Black Panther and Sean Combs, he's saying, for all the billions of dollars that these black executives have been able to make them, there's still hesitation to put them in top-level positions, that he said, of industries at large. So, they're going to recruit people from overseas. It makes sense to give executives of color a chance and embrace the evolution, instead of it being that we can only make it to, president, senior VP.
But of course, the reason they're recruiting executives from overseas is because they want to sell more to the overseas market.
Well, clearly he didn't see the Boondocks BET episode.
Well, that's because it was banned in America. It's too controversial.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much the subject matter we've gone through. This short video today, so...
We didn't get a chance to talk about Skyscraper with The Rock, where The Rock redoes Die Hard, but without any of the irony or metacritical things from Bruce Willis. But
Do
with
we
the layer
have
of
to?
Chinese film propaganda, where the Chinese are all the hyper-competent good guys, and the only reason they're not helping The Rock is they think he may have been the one responsible.
Oh, my God, yeah. Do we have to talk about that one?
Well, I mean, it's a giant burning building, and even The Rock can't uplift this movie.
No, we can't.
When are the Chinese film companies going to learn that you can't just make the Chinese the default good guys? I mean, Pacific Rim 2 is another example of that. the Chinese company that was set up to be the bad guy. Well, no, it only was bad because a white guy on the inside was tricking everybody because he had aliens in his brain.
Yeah,
And
and if you think about it, Jet Li was not happy about having to play the bad guy in Lethal Weapon 4, but he took the chance and it worked out for him. But Jet Li doesn't like playing the villain.
no, he doesn't. But we're getting a lot of these movies from China that are big budget movies, like the one starring Jet Li that Quentin Tarantino produced, Hero, is a prime example, where the Chinese are trying to sell their Confucian values as modified by modern Chinese communism, for lack of a better word. They're trying to sell those values to American film and TV, and it's not working because we have fundamental disagreements on values that should be in a story.
Yeah, and sometimes you know you kind of have to have your villains. Yeah, you have to have your. Let's see if I can call up another thing while we're talking about it because
we got the Meg coming up, which is a disaster porn movie with a giant prehistoric shark that's attacking a up and coming town in China. So that's going to be another one of these kind of movies where, okay, we have the white American actors to be here just so we can market this film in America, but most of the key plot parts from how we're going to market it are from a Chinese perspective.
Yeah, so let me call up the link here. Yeah, The Rock's new movie bombs while Hotel Transylvania 3 wins the weekend at the box office. Can't imagine why.
Well, first of all, they had to give The Rock a disability to make this movie premise at least have some level of stakes in it, which is a sign that maybe The Rock's kind of too larger than life for this kind of movie.
Yeah, and the caption underneath the image here says, "Skyscraper was the worst opening in the last 3 years for a movie where The Rock was the sole draw."
Yep.
Yeah, poor opening at the box office, only took in $25 million, coming in third place. A sequel is king once again this summer, as Adam Sandler's Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation took in $44.1 million.
Look, that's a family film. That's going to take a good amount of money.
Yeah.
That was probably a bad matchup for Legendary.
Yeah, and
it was Die Hard and the Towering Inferno put together. So
yeah.
there wasn't really a whole lot to go on there.
Yeah, in fact, even Business Insider said, Universal knew putting The Rock's movie Skyscraper, a homage to thrilling disaster movies like Die Hard and the Towering Inferno, up against a slew of sequels would be a challenge, but the studio didn't know it would turn out this bad. So it kind of reminds me of Star Trek V when Paramount decided to A, undercut William Shatner on the budget, and B, release it to compete against all this other stuff that was coming out in 1989. So it seems like it's suffering as much from that as it is from anything else. If they released it later in the year, it probably would have done better.
But I think from a production standpoint, Legendary need to say, okay, maybe we don't need all this positive Chinese ecosystem around it. Maybe there needs to be one equally compelling, charismatic Chinese protagonist character who's the one who convinces the Chinese bureaucracy that they need to trust The Rock. And make it be kind of like the relationship between Al from Die Hard and Bruce Willis. That would have been what you would have needed to sell what they wanted, and to sell it in a way that's really believable to the movie audience.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose to Ant-Man and Wasp.
And that movie shouldn't be doing as badly as it was, but they didn't really have a good idea for it. And the new Jurassic World movie was...
Yeah, and the article says, could we be entering a stage of The Rock fatigue? Well...
No.
Probably not. I mean, he's still acting even though he's not all that great an actor. I mean, he was best on WWE, but it's like a lot of these wrestlers are picked for their in-ring charisma, not for their acting abilities, and only very few.
There are a lot of movies that The Rock elevates the movie in, and that he can be a good actor in.
Yeah, he's basically...
But it's a lot like Schwarzenegger, how there's a sort of softness and tenderness that's inside the muscle-bound actor, and you need a director who knows how to take a line from one of his all other movies is to get that smoldering fire up inside him and sell that to the audience.
Yeah, because if you look at End of Days, I mean, the director managed to get some actual talent out of Schwarzenegger.
Oh yeah, he works very well with directors who get what he brings to the table as an actor. Total Recall. He plays this giant muscle-bound hulk of a man, but you believe him as the guy who's ended up in a dead-end construction job, who's not happy with his life, even though he has this amazing, sexy wife in the next room, and he just wants something better and more for his life. You believe him as the type of protagonist that should be in this movie, and he's a construction worker because look at him.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same concept from John Carpenter's They Live, where you bring in Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
Playing this drifting construction worker, and you believe it because, yeah, I mean, he's got that physical presence to him.
And also, Roddy Piper carries that sort of charisma behind him. So that can work if you have a director who knows how to work with that talent. And The Rock's also very good in Ballers. If you watch that show on HBO, I think he's actually better in episodic TV than he is in movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically where he spent the majority of his early career, was in episodic TV, although, you know, again, we're talking WWE, but it is kind of sort of episodic.
But you see the highs and lows of the character from episode to episode, from series of episode arcs to season arcs. He's better when he has that broader palette to work with as an actor.
Yeah.
That's not to say he's bad in movies. I'm saying that you need the right kind of director to cast him in a movie. Walking Tall, he was excellent in as a character in the movie. Because he was good, and the antagonist they set against him was good, and you believe their feud.
Yeah, yeah, and basically also you have to understand, you know, your actor's limitations and say, you know, look, you know, if he stays within those limitations, then he does very well within them. But once he tries to step outside of those limitations, you know, then it becomes hit or miss.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's basically, you know, defined Schwarzenegger's career, for example, because those times where he has tried to step out of his limitations.
He was also excellent in Conan, even though Conan's not a good adaptation of...
Right, well, it played to his weaknesses, basically, as an actor. It didn't require much from him. Whereas End of Days, you know, again, you know, he had to actually act in that one, and that was one of those instances where the director knew how to exploit the best of what he didn't have.
In the zombie movie he was in, they almost got it right. The zombie movie where he brings the daughter home and he's struggling with trying to take care of her and treat her, or just end her suffering. That movie almost had it right, and he's kind of struggling trying to find I'm old, I can't do the level of action that I'm used to, so how do I make a new character for myself to play a movie?
Yeah, because at some point, because in this new Terminator film that's coming out next year, he's playing the human on which the T-800s were based, which, you know, should have happened in part 2 or part 3.
Well, they completely ruined the continuity of Terminator.
Yeah, so, but, you know, because, you know, it gets to a point where, you know, he's going to be 72 when this next movie is released.
It's like Spielberg saying, yeah, we're going to make another Indiana Jones movie with Harrison Ford. What?
Right, well, you can understand Harrison Ford because he actually is supposed to age, but when you've got someone who's playing an unstoppable cyborg and it gets to the point you have to have body doubles with the face digitally added on, you know, just to make it believable, then, you know...
But there's a point at
which... is he going to be coming in at age 82 doing Terminator 5000 and he's cobbling in on camera on his walker shouting, Maria, I've still got it! Take me back! Because seriously, I mean, that's basically what he's going to be doing for the rest of his career.
Or, you know, maybe The Rock should just say, you know what, I've made ludicrous amounts of money. I should just retire and enjoy my life.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing with Schwarzenegger. You know, just go away and don't plague us anymore. Especially after the way he ran California. That's when he should have called it quits on acting and politics.
I don't know. Has he ever tried to direct anything?
I don't know, but I hope not.
I think that's the career move that really helped Clint Eastwood's career as he started becoming too old to do this.
Right, but the thing about Eastwood is that he's actually got the intelligence and also the courage enough to actually deconstruct his own character trope, because he's actually spent the last 30 or 40 years deconstructing the characters he played during the spaghetti westerns and Dirty Harry era.
Mm.
And with like Gran Torino, for example, he plays this racist Korean War soldier who's like retired and hated, hate-filled, bitter old man, but he actually realizes, in fact, there's a scene in the movie where he says he's got more in common with the people he hates than with his own family.
Yeah.
And he realizes, so he kind of realizes, he can't be a racist anymore because, he's formed this bond.
And of course, what I respected in that movie was he still does the older Hollywood thing of like, if the character does bad things past a certain point and they redeem themselves, they still have to face their punishment at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing I've always admired about Clint Eastwood as opposed to, say, Michael Douglas, where Michael Douglas, he can't ever be the bad guy or well, I know he was the bad guy in a Perfect Murder, but,
And he was also the bad guy in Wall Street.
Yeah, but, he doesn't actually learn any lessons from it, though, except maybe in Wall Street 2, but even then, they kind of...
That was just a bad movie.
Yeah. That was one of those things that didn't need to be made, or if it did have to be made, have him really kind of portray the guy who learned his lesson and maybe watches it, futilely, as the next generation makes all the same mistakes he did and then some, and either gets away with it or, goes to jail, but, he ends up, being kind of like, geez, people don't learn anything. It's like, I went to jail for this, and you're doing the same thing. Don't you learn anything? They could have gone that route, but it's like, oh my God, dude.
Yeah, that could have been interesting. And that's the kind of frustrating things when you're really into movies. We keep seeing a real degradation of the craft of movie making. And more in the movies these days.
Yeah, and, then it becomes up to stuff like Hereditary. Let me look that up real quick. Because that one also is making news. And I was talking about this with Tom Connors the other day.
Yeah.
And
Hereditary is getting us away from the jump scare phenomenon movies, hopefully.
Yeah, although Wired had a really silly article here, and let's see if I can pull this up here. Alright, page is taking forever to load. Yeah, Wired.com had this really stupid article that says Satanists just aren't scary anymore. Yeah, clearly you haven't seen the movie.
Well, the movie's scary. That's the universal thing I've heard from everybody who's seen it. It's a scary movie, but I think what they mean is the concept of Satan no longer has the cultural relevance.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not on the level of, say, during the 1970s when you had Rosemary's Baby, you had The Omen, you had, to a lesser extent, The Wicker Man, which I think this movie owes a lot to, actually. But, yeah,
I've never actually watched the 1970s Wicker Man. I've only watched the unfortunate one made by Nicolas Cage.
Oh, you're missing out. I've got the extended cut that comes in the wooden box, and, yeah, it's actually a lot better than the theatrical
it has to
release.
Be a lot better, but the Nicolas Cage movie crosses that event horizon that it becomes so bad it becomes high comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, and but even Wired says that in many ways Hereditary is a throwback to older films like Don't Look Now and Rosemary's Baby. And, it's a good classic style, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I think there might be some point to it, but at the same time, you have to take the movie at face value. And
well, we've become numb to the problem of evil. Like, let's use The Last Jedi as a great whipping horse for this.
Yeah.
The sequence of Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren recounting that scene in the cabin where Luke's trying to kill Kylo. The movie wants Luke to be good, but Luke is doing a demonstrably evil thing. And it wants Kylo to be bad, but he's not doing anything. Movies are afraid to say, there's good and bad in the world. There's things that are evil. There are things that are irredeemable. There are lines that can't be crossed.
Yeah, and here at theatlantic.com has another movie with that I think again misses the mark. It says Hereditary and the Monstrousness of Creative Moms, Ari Aster's horror film belongs to a long tradition of stories that see something sinister or unnatural about artistic mothers. But that's actually, obviously this person has not seen the movie because there's nothing sinister about Toni Collette's character here. In fact, I mean, there's her mother, her character's mother, and other people, but, she's not sinister. She's not unnatural. She's basically trying to cope with the deaths of family members. She is having trouble coping with these events, and that's obviously leading to a lot of the stuff that takes place in the film. But this is really a misreading of the film, and it makes me wonder if half these reviewers actually bother watching what they're reviewing, because or if maybe they're watching a different movie or a different cut than the rest of us are, because this is completely inaccurate. I've seen the movie, and it's nothing like this.
Sometimes people miss this sage piece of wisdom from Sigmund Freud. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Yeah, and one thing I liked about Hereditary is that Aster actually keeps you guessing as to how much of the story within the film is taking place, because spoiler alert, it opens panning from a view from the attic to the treehouse, and then it pans from the window to the miniature house, and then zooms in on the room where the father then walks in and wakes up the son. So you kind of wonder just how much of this is actually taking place, and how much is delusion being held by various family members as they break down because of all this stuff coming out. So, it's one of those things where, and again, I discussed this with Tom Connors last time, where the film really, Aster goes out of his way to make you angry, but not for the reasons that Ruin Johnson does, where Johnson is just doing it out of contempt for the audience, but Aster actually wants to piss you off by making you confront things that you might find uncomfortable to deal with. Yep. And I think that's a crucial difference here between Hereditary and The Last Jedi, where you're actually forcing the audience to think about things that a lot of people don't like having to think about, because it's too painful, because it hits too close to home. And that, I think, is the whole point. And yeah, not everything is black and white in real life situations. Such as dealing with mental illness or someone who's hiding secrets. I mean, take about, getting back to Schwarzenegger, he hid getting open heart surgery from his family, which pissed them off, because, when were you going to tell us if you died on the operating table, and we got told by the doctor? And then when he decided to run for governor without consulting his wife, and then it came out, that he had an affair with his maid and was paying her hush money to cover up the illegitimate son he had. It's secrets like that, or mental illness, or, your parent being part of a group that's unhealthy, stuff like this that really is what the movie is actually all about. And I think people don't like confronting that, which is why they're so upset, along with, the ending, which, again, was kind of screwed up. But again, you have to keep in mind the context in which the writer wanted it to be understood.
It's about a rotting corruption where small little mistakes lead to something becoming a cancer, basically.
Yeah, to the point where the whole thing just rots and dies off. I mean, the whole situation. I mean, it's one of those rare movies that makes you think, and that it's a horror film, I think is very appropriate, because that's actually the perfect vehicle, along with true science fiction, for making you think about stuff that you never let yourself think about before. Although with science fiction, it's really more about elevating your consciousness, whereas horror, it's about telling a story that makes you confront something you might not necessarily want to deal with.
Exactly.
And a good example of that is It Follows, which is basically about AIDS and unsafe sex and the consequences that can come from that. So, Spoilers, obviously, for those who haven't seen the movie, but it's been out for a while, so shame on you if you haven't. Go see it. But and also, if you still haven't seen Hereditary, it's still in theaters, I think, although not for long. So go see that because it really needs to be seen on the big screen. If you wait till it's on home video or Netflix, I think you're missing something.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, I think
This
that's
is a good show.
yeah. I think that's pretty much all the time we've got for today. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss before we go?
Well, an up-and-coming controversy is the new art style of what's popularly called Cal arts on the internet, where you make things vaguely androgynous, is now being applied to She-Ra, which is going to be getting a Netflix series soon.
Wait, She-Ra? As in
Yep.
Princess of Power from the 80s?
Yep. She's now getting the androgynous modern new cartoon series, and the new She-Ra drawing looks just like the artist who's the lead artist on the series. I mean,
If it's Steven Universe like they're doing with Thundercats Go, then yeah.
it's a little bit better than that, but not a whole lot.
All right, that's something we can discuss next time, which is because I don't have the patience to discuss the state of revived cartoons right now, because that
Also-
does, I mean, it doesn't ruin my childhood, but it does kind of ruin my nostalgia for my childhood.
Also, the guy who was the head writer from Avatar, who didn't join on for The Legend of Korra, which is popularly viewed to be a mistake, now is doing his own series on Netflix. So that's going to be coming out relatively soon. So we're going to see if he was really the brains behind the whole operation now that he's the guy who's buying the grocery.
Oh God. Okay. Well, yeah, that'll be a whole wealth of material for next time. All right. So this is Michael Wilk for the Wilk Report and Larry Bernard.
So,
Saying,
yeah.
All right. Saying take care. Good night. We're out.